Good afternoon and welcome to The Way to Wow, People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and an hour in for each of the other time zones, Mountain and Central. Trying to think of a descriptive word for them and couldn't do it. So thank you for joining me, if I didn't say that before. We once a week spend an hour talking about how we can improve our professional success, hence the name People Making Money. Of course, money isn't the only marker of professional success, but it's one of the biggest. And I think for most of us, we have a particular monetary goal in mind with our work, and sometimes we have to sacrifice other things about our professional lives in order to meet that goal so that we can support ourselves, our families, the people who on whom rely on us. And so that's what we're here to do every day. Gosh, last week, I don't remember what I talked about, but I invite you to go to our YouTube channel, The Way to Wow Show, on YouTube. You can just go to youtube.com/c/The Way to Wow, and you will be there. Please subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and you'll see all the previous episodes. This is our third season of the show, and we'll be wrapping up this season in December. So in just really about a couple of months, season 4 will start in January, and we'll continue to have these midweek hourly sessions, both talking about information and knowledge that we need to have, and talking to people who have found their way to wow professionally, and so they can give us some thoughts about how they got to where they are today. And on that note, I want to mention that next week, my very long-time friend, Bob Sanders, Dr. Bob Sanders, will be my guest on the show. This is a return engagement for Bob. He was on the show during season 1. Bob recently got a new job. He's been with NASA for the last quite a number of years now. He was in their dive program, and now he has transitioned. He's a flight surgeon, and he is the program manager for basically the upcoming walk on the moon. All right, so talk about wow. That's definitely it. Now, of course, I joke somewhat because wow doesn't literally mean wow. In our show's context, it means what you want, right? So where's my, here's my graphic, right? Who are you? Way, what you want, wow. And so that's what we mean when we talk about the way to wow. So today, I'm going to talk about the decision we all have to make between getting a job versus starting a business. So I think many of us have the dream of starting our own business, and yet business formation, I haven't checked the statistics lately, so maybe things have changed in the last year or two, but over the last decade or more, small business formation in the United States has been getting less and less and less. And on some level, I think that's really a shame. However, how I want to conduct my professional career really isn't relevant to how you want to build your career. So I want to take a look at the pros and cons between having a job versus having a business. I'm going to attempt to do so without bias, although I gave away my bias, which I think is valid for you to know that. I mean, my bias is toward starting my own business and or starting a business, being a part of a business startup. Doesn't necessarily require that we do it on our own. And so I'm going to go through 10 points that I think are worth considering. And here we go. Let's see. Okay, and let's see if we're going to be able to Are they going to let me put this in slideshow mode? Here we go. Play from the start. See if this is going to work. It's always you know, always there we go. Fantastic. Okay, so job versus owning a business. These are 10 issues to consider. And I'm going to move the image of myself here in the front so I, you know, look at you as we do this. So before I get into those 10 issues, though, I do want to remind you or talk about what I call the primary mindset shift we have to make in our professional lives. And that is that wealth, or in our financial lives, let me change it. This is the mind shift I think we need to make in our financial lives. And that is that wealth comes from value delivered. So the more value we can deliver to our employer, or if we have a business, to our customers or clients, the more money we're going to make. Now, let me quickly add that value doesn't necessarily mean something monetary. For a lot of us, I'll give you an example. My dentist referred me to a periodontist, and I called the office earlier today to set an appointment. And the woman who scheduled the appointment for me, I mean, she was terrific, so personable, so easy to deal with. It was really a pleasure to speak with her. You know, she before the call rang off, she said, "Hey, I'm looking forward to meeting you." I mean, what a nice thing to say, right? Didn't take any really. I mean, I don't know if it took effort. I hope it didn't take effort. I hope she sincerely wanted to do that, but he wanted to meet me. But even if not, she's delivering value for that periodontist practice. And so there's lots and lots of ways that we can deliver value beyond just you know, dollars and cents. And so I invite you to think about that. And I would say, by the way, in really almost any realm of our life, when we speak about wealth, so a wealth of friends, a wealth of mental wellness, a wealth of physical wellness, all of these things come down to this same equation, if you will. So it comes from value delivered. If we want to have close friends, we need to be valuable in their lives, and they need to be valuable in our lives. There's definitely trade-off is the wrong word. There's got to be a mutual benefit in the case of friends and relationships, family members, if we want those relationships to build and become stronger. If we want to be physically healthy, we need to deliver value, in this case, to ourselves. And I've talked in the last week or two, maybe 3 weeks, about the things that we need to do to be physically healthy. That's the value we deliver to ourselves. So for any of the realms in the 3 pillars of attainment, I guess I should go this way, it'll be easier to see. In any of these, it really comes, wealth comes, meaning an abundance of, comes from value delivered to others or to ourselves. Okay, so I encourage you to consider this, to candidly adopt it as your one of the key aspects of your mindset. Okay, so let's proceed from there then. So in looking at the 10 issues of whether we should get a job or start a business, you know, probably uppermost in people's minds, oops, there you go, I clicked and uppermost in people's minds is the idea of income potential. Oh, and you know what? I should have, well, I'm not sure. Oh, you know what? I just realized I didn't put that slide in. So I'll have to do it from memory. So I looked up the median income for employees versus business owners here in the United States. And in reality, there isn't a real big difference. The median income for employees is around $54,000 a year, and the median income for business owners is a little, just slightly under $51,000 a year. So what, about an 8% difference, I guess, something like that. 7-8% difference. So not a lot. Now, in terms of for the business owners, the lowest 10% of business owners are making about $27,000 a year. Okay, that's their median. The top 10% are making $91,000. Okay, so I think that's something to keep in mind. And that is that, you know, I think we have this idea that, oh, if I start my own business, I'm going to be rolling in money. That may very well be the case. But, you know, I'm not sneezing at $91,000, but that's all it takes to get in the top 10%. That's, you know, compared to, you know, jobs that are out there, to me, that doesn't seem like a lot more than what you would make once you've been in the job market for a while. So, you know, I don't know that on its face, income potential is a powerful determinant for us either way. Here's where I think income potential may be a factor, and that is when you're an employee, the bottom line is someone else is going to have at least some say over how much you make. Okay, even if you're in a commission role where, you know, you produce, let's say you're a pharmaceutical rep. So pharmaceutical reps tend to get salary plus overrides, right? And so the more they produce, the more they make. But in the final analysis, they do not determine the percentage of their overrides, nor do they determine their salary all by themselves. It's in negotiation with the company, okay? Whereas when you have your own business, really the amount of income you make is up to you. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. If you're not particularly self-motivated, well, so then maybe starting a business isn't for you, because it takes motivation, it takes hard work, it takes dedication. All of those, you've got to push yourself to meet your income potential. Whereas when you're working for a company, then you know what you need to do hopefully is reasonably well defined. If you do it, you get your salary, and that's kind of it. And even if you're in, like I said, something like pharmaceutical sales where there's an override, well, so you know there's going to be a team there kind of pushing you. I don't necessarily mean pushing you in a negative way, but sort of helping you stay motivated and all of that. So I think that when we talk about income potential, those are the kind of things that we need to consider. Okay, so income potential, that's number one. Number two is wealth building. Now, when I talk about wealth building, I mean exactly that, building up a net worth, if you will. So net worth is defined as the value of your assets minus your liabilities, and what you have left over is your net worth. So let's say maybe you own a house, it's worth $400,000. There is a $275,000 loan against the house. So your equity in the house is $125,000. Now, if you don't have any other assets and you have no other liabilities, that's also your personal net worth, $125,000. Okay. Now you may have a car loan, you may have some investment accounts or whatever. So, you know, in that case, you need to add up all your assets, add up all your liabilities, subtract liabilities from assets. That gives you your net worth, i.e. your wealth. So when you work for a company and I'm gonna put a qualifier on this, and you do not have something like stock options, or you don't own a piece of the company, you are strictly an employee in shall we say the purest sense of that word. So you are likely not developing any wealth. Now, an exception to that would be if you have some kind of pension plan, right? And there's two kinds of pension plans generally. There are what are called defined benefit pensions, and there's defined contribution pensions. Now, it used to be, going back 50 or more years ago, if a company had a pension plan, it was a defined benefit pension plan. Now, what that means is how much you get paid once you retire is defined. So when you retire from the company, they'll let you know, okay, you're going to get $3,000 a month for the rest of your life. That's a defined benefit plan. And then the sponsor of the plan, typically the company, it's up to them to make sure that the money is there to pay you. A defined contribution plan, which is what you see today in most private sector companies, okay, unless there's a union involved. So in a defined benefit pension plan, the amount you invest periodically, typically monthly, is defined. Maybe it's $200 a month or $500 a month or whatever that is. The benefit you get when you retire will vary depending on the performance of the investments you made, and depending on how the market continues to respond to inflation or whatever else is going on as you start taking payments out of that pension. So and there are companies who have defined contribution plans where they'll match all or a part of your contribution. And so that's how they contribute to it to make it more attractive for their employees. So you may be building some wealth there. Now, if you work for a government, for a government, period, whether it's the federal, state government, municipal government, well, I shouldn't say municipal governments because that probably varies. To be honest with you, unless it's a large city, I can't say for sure that you're going to have a pension. But if you work for the federal government, state government, large city like Los Angeles, where you're a union employee, you're going to have a defined benefit pension. So you are in essence building wealth. So I have a friend of mine recently retired from being a professor at UCLA. And one of the decisions he had to make was, do I take my pension benefit in a lump sum, or do I take it, in monthly payments, right? So he had built wealth in that pension plan. Okay. And he was able to do that. That's on the employee side. Now on the own a business side, okay, if you build up a business, not only can you have a pension plan in that business, the same as you could if you were an employee of a company you don't own, but the business itself has value in it. And there's several ways that can be the case. So I believe last week or the week before, I mentioned a company called Primerica. So Primerica is a financial services company. And one of the benefits that, and when you work for Primerica, you really have your own business. So it's sort of a misnomer to say work for Primerica. It's more like you're more like an independent contractor for Primerica. Not more like, you are an independent contractor for Primerica, and therefore you really are working for yourself. So among the benefits that you have of doing that are, you build what's called residual income, which means, for example, if you build up an investment practice where people are investing money, let's say in their 401k, I'm sorry, not their 401ks, their IRAs through your efforts. Okay, so those investment accounts will pay you a residual income over time. So even after you retire, you're going to continue to get that income stream. Okay, so that's one way that you build wealth owning your own business is to be in a business where there's a residual income. Another is in the business itself. So when I joined the Navy, I had my real estate company and I was able to sell that business. Okay, and I collected, the money for that. So not now, let me hasten to add, not every business ends up having a value to it. Okay, it depends. There's got to be assets in the business that people will pay for. So in the case of a real estate company, I had a management company, and because those contracts generated monthly revenue, there was a value in that in my business that I was able to capture by selling it. Okay, so again, it can vary a lot. Now, by the way, a law practice. Law firms continue to consolidate, and so there's value in a law practice, primarily either in the reputation of the lawyers and their ability to generate business, or their ability to deal with certain types of cases very well, right? So all of those things can factor in. And if you have a small business like a restaurant or something like that, then it may very well have a value. So the value that you build in the business is creating wealth for you. Okay, and at some point you can sell that business and realize that wealth, or maybe sell a part of the business, and that will generate wealth for you. So as a way to generate wealth, I think it's reasonable to say that a business has a greater ability to do that. Okay, number 3, schedule and time commitment. So one of the pieces of information I came across when I was putting this presentation together was a graphic that showed people who own their own business. 75% of people who own their own businesses work 50 or more hours per week. And it's split roughly half and half of the 75 between 50 plus hours and 60 plus hours. So what that's really saying is, if you want to be successful in a business, you're going to be working a minimum of 50 hours a week, and maybe much more than that, maybe 60 plus hours a week, especially in the beginning. Okay. Now, if you have a job, you may be working, 50 hours a week in a job too. It depends on the job, right? But some jobs don't require that. Some jobs only require you to work 40 hours a week. And as long as you work your 40 hours a week, you get your, periodic paychecks, and that's all you have to be concerned about. Okay. So the time commitment to a business is I would say greater than the time commitment you would typically make as an employee, especially as a median income employee. Now, of course, the higher you go up in a particular company, the more time you're going to commit. And I would imagine, most senior leadership in a company, they're probably working the same kind of hours that, business owners work. Of course, they're hopefully getting well paid for that, right? So there is the trade-off. Now, the difference or the other issue is scheduling flexibility, and that's what I mean by schedule and time commitment. So when you're an employee, you may not have a whole lot of flexibility to deal with life in general. Okay, whereas if you own your own business, you have a lot more flexibility. So if you want to go to your child's, soccer game a particular afternoon, you don't. If you have your own business, you don't have to ask whoever you report to, hey, can I take the afternoon off to go, to my child's soccer game? You just work your schedule around doing that, and that's what I found. That's what I've always found in having my own business. And for me, by the way, aside from the ability to build wealth, the scheduling flexibility is one of the most important parts of owning my own business for me. I like having that schedule. So because I own my own business, for example, when on the weeks my daughter is with me, not only can I take her to school in the morning, but I can pick her up in the afternoon. I've built my schedule to be able to do that because number one, I think it's important for me to do that, especially since she started high school this year and making the adjustments so I can be there for her to say a few words to her as she heads off to school, and I can be there for her when school is done to help her sort of decompress and figure out her day if she needs to. To me, that is the most important part it's the most important thing I do in my life, period. That's it. Okay. And so if I worked for someone else, there's a good chance I wouldn't have that kind of flexibility unless I were a very, senior person and therefore, had that kind of flexibility. And by the way, as a senior person, from a leadership standpoint, I'm not necessarily particularly comfortable with the idea that I get to have more flexibility than my team has. So, you have to set the example in when you have people working with you. And so, I think it's to be in that situation can there can be other barriers to schedule flexibility besides just whether or not it's permitted by the people to whom you report. Okay, so schedule and time commitment, I think that's a balancing issue to consider. What's more important for you there? Okay, number 4, security. What I call one client versus multiple clients. Why one versus multiple clients? So here's the thing. My sense is that most people think having a job is more secure because the kind of the perspective is if I show up, do my work, I get my paycheck, don't have to worry. Okay. Whereas in a business, and we'll talk about this more in one of the other issues, from month to month or year to year, as the business ebbs and flows and as the economy changes, how well the business is doing may change, and so there's not the same kind of stability as income. I think that's how most people look at this issue. I want to give you a different perspective, and again, this is another one of my key reasons why I choose to be a business owner. When I look at working as an employee, my sense is that I have one client. And that one client, especially here in a state like California, has the ability to essentially fire me or lay me off at will. Okay. And so if I lose that one client, my entire income is gone. Okay. And this just happened to a friend of mine. He was really working in a job. He just loved what he was doing. And over the last, up until about roughly a month ago, the company was saying, we're doing great. We're looking forward to expanding and all this stuff. And everybody felt like their jobs were really secure. And then about a month ago, the company cut 20% of their workforce. And my friend lost his job and he lost his entire income. And now he's doing something he hates just to bring in some money while he figures out what his next step is. So while the way, our income is paid is different as an employee than it is when we own a business, or maybe different, the reality is we've just got one client when we work for an organization. Whereas if we have our own business, we have multiple clients. So, I mean, I had various clients when I was in the real estate business before, that after a while dealing with them was it was too difficult. And I had the ability to fire a client without losing all of my income. Whereas when I was an employee before I started my company, and I got to the point where I just could not stand working for the guy I was working for, I only had one choice. That was to fire that employer and lose all my income, which I did. I had to struggle. And that's when I started my business. I said, hey, never again am I putting myself in a situation where basically I have one client and I could lose all my income in one fell swoop. By the way, I think people do recognize this more these days. That's why you see a lot of people with, I think they call them side hustles, or, alternative gigs or whatever, whether they're driving, Uber or something like that. And by the way, I think those are great. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do those things, right? And that's also where I know I mentioned Primerica before, but that's also where getting involved in something like Primerica on a part-time basis, it gives you something to fall back on in case you lose the job that you have, or you just get to the point with your job, well, I cannot stand this, got to do something else. Okay. So, security, I think you need to, I would encourage you, I should say, to think about, what does security really mean to you? And are you as secure as an employee as you would be as a business owner? Okay. So that's number 4. And I just want to check timing here. Yep, we're doing well. Good. Okay. So next, number 5, professional satisfaction. So a lot of people tend to think that they'll get greater professional satisfaction starting their own business. And they may, okay? But I think too that there can be a lot of professional satisfaction in being an employee. I just think it depends what you're doing, how much you like what you're doing, the atmosphere, the professional atmosphere in which you're working, the people who you work with, the person who you report to or work for. All of those, I think, have an impact on professional satisfaction. So I'll go back to this woman I spoke to this morning at the periodontist office. I have a sense, and I'm going to be curious to ask her when we meet, face to face. Her name is Kim. I would say, Kim, how would you rate your professional satisfaction working here? I'm curious to know the answer to that question, because my sense is she rates it very high. That's probably one of the reasons why she's so pleasant to deal with, and the way she treats patients or potential patients the way she does. And I would extend it to say, I suspect working for that periodontist is probably pretty pleasant. He's probably a pretty nice guy, that all goes into it. So I'm just speculating here. So I wouldn't necessarily accord greater professional satisfaction to having your own business. This is what I will say about it. If you have your own business, you have control over your route to professional satisfaction. Okay? You do have control of, because it's your business. Now, here's the thing, and this may come up a little bit later. This actually, it will come up a little bit later, but these two work together. When you have your own business, inevitably, you're going to have to do some things that you probably don't like to do, because it's your business. Somebody's got to do it. Now, hopefully you'll get, your business to the point where you can hire someone to do those things that you don't like to do, someone who does like to do them, right? That would be ideal. But especially in the beginning, okay, whatever professional satisfaction you feel for having your own business is going to be at least partially offset by the reality that you're going to have to be doing some things that you don't like to do, because the buck is going to stop with you, right? The famous quote by President Harry Truman. So I would encourage you to think about that And whereas when you're an employee, now, by the way, there may be things you have to do as an employee that you don't like to do, right? However, if you might be able to work yourself to employee where you're doing what you love to do, and then you have an assistant to do the other stuff or whatever. So in the end, I don't know that we can accord a greater amount of professional satisfaction to one or the other, but I think it's a matter of how much control do you want over your ability to attain professional satisfaction over the medium to long term. That's really where it counts. Short term, probably not a lot of control, perhaps in either a job or owning a business. Oh, that's weird. I didn't click or anything. It just ticks. Okay. We were just 5. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So 6. Okay. Personal growth potential. This is, and you could argue, well, this is part of professional growth. I don't know that that's necessarily the same thing. Here's what I found as a business owner. My success as a business owner, I'm sorry, professional, you say it could be a part of professional satisfaction. I separate them because I think there is a difference. So my success as a business owner was tied very closely to my personal growth. Okay. And I think I've talked about this before. When I first started in business, I had inherited from, especially my father, a kind of, an attitude that most, if not all, wealthy people became wealthy through dishonest means. And, I'm out there looking to attract clients, real estate clients, who for the most part are at least somewhat wealthy, right? And the sort of underlying attitude I had was insulting to them. Not that I ever said that to them, but I think people sense these things. So one of the things I had to do was I had to grow personally to look beyond the sort of cliches or beyond the stereotypes to see the individual people. And what I found was, in general, wealth tended to make a person what I call even more so. So if a person was a good person, they were kind, they cared about other people. So money gave them the ability to exercise their kindness and to care more about other people. And conversely, for people who were selfish and who were mean, wealth gave them a greater opportunity to be more selfish and meaner, right? So I don't think wealth necessarily, I don't think wealth is a controlling factor in the character of a human being. I think it just tends to drive them in whatever direction they pretty much want to go. I was able to learn that and therefore grow personally when I had my business in a way that I never did as an employee. And in fact, as an employee, to a certain extent, that bad attitude was reinforced, because it seemed like, I wanted more money or whatever from who I was working for. And the real estate guy I was working for, I would work hours and hours and tens of hours and hundreds of hours, and I got almost no compensation from him. And he was a wealthy guy. And very selfish, basically. And so working for someone in this case didn't afford me the opportunity for personal growth, because the one person I was dependent on for my income happened to be not a good guy, and he reinforced the stereotype I had. So when you have your own business, one of the things you're going to need to do is really examine yourself periodically and see, where am I holding myself back? What skills don't I have? What attitudes do I have that are not conducive to my success? What values do I hold that maybe they're false values? Okay. What I found over the 20 years I had my real estate business was I became more understanding and more empathetic, because in the crush of having to deal with people, especially tenants, and be the go-between between the tenants and the owners of the buildings, you know, my attitude of, well, you know, every owner, all they care about is maximizing their money. I realized, well, that's not true. Not every owner cares about maximizing their money. A lot of the clients I had really cared about making sure they were providing a decent place to live for their tenants. And so early on in my business, I would sometimes find myself in conflict saying, well, you don't need to spend this money because, you know, too bad for them otherwise. And they'd be like, well, no, I've got a responsibility. And so I also learned from these people and grew personally to become, I think, a better person, right? Now, would I have done that working for someone else? I don't know. I think we become who it is we're associated with. And so the fact that as an employee, when I say associated with, report to as an employee, to the extent that we report to someone who's perhaps not a particularly great person, I think that will overshadow other personal growth opportunities. Now, you may have a different experience. I absolutely respect that. What I will say is, like with professional satisfaction, having your own business gives you control over gives you more control over your personal growth. So hopefully you're pursuing it no matter what, but in any event, as a business owner, even when you have partners, you're going to have much greater control over your potential for personal growth. Okay. All right. Let's go on to number 7. Yep. We're doing good on time. Okay. Risk and stress. Okay. Now, these are two of the things that, you know, I would say are the worst aspects of being a business owner. So, and not that being an employee means you have no risk and no stress. Obviously you do. And the higher up you go in an organization, probably the more stress you have, and also probably the more risk you have, because the more money you make, risk in the sense of, you know, losing the financial level that you've reached. Okay. So, but in general, as an employee, I think we look at that as being less risky. And there's probably in the sense that, you know, since we're not, I mean, unless we are the driver of the income for the business, so then, you know, as long as the income is there, I'm good. I'll have to worry about making sure the dollars are there to pay my salary, though other people have that responsibility, right? Now, there's always going to be some stress, but you don't have that stress of being the rainmaker, as it's called. Okay, I mean, unless you're a rainmaker for the company. Okay, and hopefully, if you're a rainmaker for the company, you've got some equity in the company, by the way. So in that case, you're a business owner, even if it's only a minority share. Okay. Here's the thing: when you own your own business, again, the buck stops with you. And here's the reality: in the first 5 years, 80% of startups fail. Okay. Now you may say, "Oh, I'm gonna be in the 20% that succeeds after 5 years." Good. Okay. But just understand that the odds are against you. And so what you need to do to be in that 20% after 5 years is a lot of hard work, a lot of growth, a lot of stress, in order to potentially offset that risk. Okay. And what's more is you've got to be able to perform at a high level despite the risk and stress. Okay. Which means you got to have a way to deal with it. Now, my way to deal with it is primarily exercise. That's how I deal with stress. Exercise. Okay. Now, a lot of business owners deal with it the same way, but some deal with it in very unhealthy ways: drinking, drugs, overeating, engaging in all kinds of self-abusive behaviors, right? And so they may get to the point where now they have a successful business, but their health, both physical, mental, and spiritual health, is just shot to hell, right? So is that trade-off worth it? I don't know. I mean, some business owners I've spoken to seem to feel it is. A lot of them seem to feel it is not, right? So again, this is something I encourage you to think about. And again, not that being an employee is risk-free. There are certainly risks. Now, of course, the tighter the labor market, the lower the risk for employees. But even in a pretty tight labor market like we have right now, there are layoffs happening. Companies are tightening their belts in anticipation of a potential recession, perhaps next year. So, all of these things are real risks. Having said that, I do think that for most people, the risk and stress of having their own business is greater than being an employee. It's just how we perceive them, okay? So something to think about. And now let's move on to number 8. Okay, authority, responsibilities, duties, and tasks, right? So much of what makes up what we do day to day, whether as an employee or as a business owner, is going to be our duties and tasks. Okay. And I talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of professional satisfaction. As a business owner, especially in the beginning, you're going to have duties and tasks that you do not like to do. That's just what it's going to be. And you're going to have to do them. Okay. You're just going to have to accept that. Now, hopefully the business, like I said, the business will become more successful and you'll get someone else to do them. But in the short term, in the near term, you're going to be doing them because you have those responsibilities. Okay. You can't shift them off to somebody else. Okay. Now, the same may be true as an employee. Having said that, as you go through your job hunt, hopefully you are looking for a job that aligns with the things that you like to do and are good at doing. Okay. So whatever duties and tasks there may be associated with the job that you don't like are minimal. Okay. There's probably not a job out there where, you have no duties and tasks at all that you don't like, but you minimize them. Okay. And especially once you get to the point where you can have, an assistant or an executive assistant or whatever. So then again, you can lateral those off to someone else. So in this particular issue, what I find to be the more important pairing is authority versus responsibilities. Okay. And this was something I learned very early on in my professional life. My first job out of college, I worked for a lawyer, and my mother got me the job. She was his bookkeeper, and she needed some bookkeeping help, and he also needed some help preparing cases. So he made me his law clerk. Okay, I couldn't be a paralegal because that means I'd been through paralegal school. So I was his law clerk. That's what we figured out. Okay, so here was the thing. Even for my mother, who had been a full charge bookkeeper for years and years and years before she got that job, she had enormous responsibility, but almost no authority. And it made it extremely difficult for her to get her work done. It was probably her biggest source of dissatisfaction in her life. And I would see it on a regular basis. And now, for me, a kid, well, I wasn't a kid, okay, a young guy just out of college, early 20s, the fact that I didn't have much of any authority didn't seem so strange because I was new to the work world. I didn't know a whole lot about the law, so I had to learn. And in many cases, the person I reported to was my mother, and so if I would say, hey mom, here's what I'm working on, here's what I think ought to do. A lot of times, if it was within her authority, which a lot of the work that I did happen to be within her authority, it's okay. She'll, dos vidania, as we say, she just go with it, and that was fine, or let me go with it. It is, I think, one of the biggest sources of dissatisfaction in being an employee is when there's a mismatch between authority and responsibility, because it hampers one's ability to do one's job. Okay. And that's why I was having this conversation, I believe it was last week, with somebody. And I was saying that one of my core leadership principles is to push responsibility with commensurate authority as low down in the structure of an organization as I can. So I want people to have the authority to fulfill their responsibilities, knowing they're going to make mistakes. And then they'll have an opportunity to learn from those mistakes, and they'll exercise their authority more prudently going forward. I think that makes overall for a much less stressful work environment for everybody. So always in the businesses that I've owned, I've done my best to match authority with responsibility. Now, there are some cases where I can't, where there's some sort of statutory authority that as the licensed individual I had to retain, and that's just how it is. Nonetheless, I did let my team members know that while they may not have literally the decision-making authority, what I really wanted them to do was come up with the solutions. And then if they, run them by me with the idea that, hopefully at most, I'm going to just have to tweak a couple of things because there's something that they don't know about. Otherwise, they'll be good to go, great plan, roll with it, right? So this is another one of my key reasons why I like being a business owner is I have the ability to match authority with responsibility. Now, if it's a startup and I'm the only one there, of course I do. But even as I build the business and bring people into it, I can do that matching. And I think that's very important. So another important issue to consider in the employee versus business owner decision. Okay, strategic and operational flexibility. So depending on what level of employee you are, you may have little, if any, strategic and operational flexibility. Now, if you're at the C-suite level, presumably you're going to have, at least some, if not quite a bit. Now, obviously, if you're the CEO of the organization, so then in the end, the strategic and operational flexibility rests largely with you. You may have to report and be responsible to a board of directors or something like that. There may be people within the company that you need to consult with before making a decision, or certain decisions may be made by certain committees, whatever. But you're going to have a lot more influence, if not actual authority, over the strategic and operational direction of the organization. Okay, but for the typical employee in an organization, they're going to have little, if any, strategic and operational flexibility. Okay, and that too, I think, can be a very frustrating aspect of being an employee. Whereas if you are a business owner, this is going to be one of your primary responsibilities, is to guide your company, your organization, strategically and operationally, okay? To set that plan that then everybody else will work within, okay? And that's how I do it. I set a strategic direction, I create an operational plan, and then in executing that strategy, I give each person kind of their domain, if you will, so they have authority to match their responsibility within their operational objectives. Okay, and that I find that to be the most conducive to professional satisfaction, to enhancing personal growth, to profitability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so This I think is something that a lot of employees or potential employees don't consider. How important is it for me to be able to impact the direction of the company, right? So give that some thought as you're, making these decisions. And then finally, number 10, operations versus growth. So typically, as an employee, you're going to be on one side of this or the other, unless you're at very senior management where you're overseeing a lot of people. And in that case, while you may be responsible for both, you're going to have teams of people to direct, to make these things happen. It's not going to be your sole responsibility. Okay, so most employees are not going to be in the dilemma of, do I focus on operations? Do I focus on growth? As a business owner, and again, as I've mentioned on some of the other issues, especially in the beginning, you're going to feel a constant push and pull between focusing on operations versus focusing on growth. And what happens for a lot of small businesses is, initially they focus on growth, bringing in clients, customers, whatever, and now all of a sudden they got all these clients and customers to service, and so the focus goes off growth and it goes into operations, meaning taking care of the clients and customers, and they sort of get that taken care of, and then all of a sudden they're looking down, the timeline, and they realize, oh my gosh, I have no new business coming in. Well, now they got to go back and focus on growth, and so then the operations slip a little bit, or slips more than a little bit, and they start losing clients and customers, and it feels like it's a constant pendulum between the two. And getting some kind of balance between operations versus growth is among the very biggest challenges you'll have as a business owner. And it can, frankly, at times be pretty crazy making. Okay, I can tell you, again, from personal experience, this was one of the most crazy making aspects of my business until I got it big enough that I was able to hire people to handle operations, especially day-to-day operations, so I could more consistently focus on growth. So by the time I sold my business, I focused on setting the strategy, creating the operational plan, generating the business. Those were the three things that I did. And a lot of the operations I had other people handling, right? Getting there is a fantastic goal, but it's probably going to take at least a few years, if not longer. Okay, so in the decision of, do I be an employee, do I be a business owner, again, this is something I encourage you to give serious consideration to, because it is one of the key sources of stress in a business, right? And the inability to successfully deal with this, these two aspects of your business are one of the key reasons why businesses don't succeed. Okay, because one gets short shrift at the expense of the other. There's got to be a balance. Okay, and it does you no good to get clients in the door and then they're not taken care of properly, and so they're going out the door while you're bringing new ones in. You're just churning through clients, not building a business. Okay, so again, I encourage you to think about that. Is that a challenge that you want to take on? And by the way, if on these 10, most likely you're going to identify at least a few that you think you're very good at, and others that you're not very good at. Okay, and so then the idea I would recommend is to think about, okay, based on the things that I'm good at, will I really enjoy being an employee versus being a business owner? Because we can be good at something but still not enjoy it. Right? So those don't necessarily coincide. So do look at those aspects. Out of these 10, which are the ones you're good at? Which are the 10? Which are the ones that you think you would enjoy doing? And how do those match up, especially vis-a-vis the issues of being an employee versus being a business owner? Okay. Oh, we're coming up on time here. So let's just real quickly, if you want any help with hashing these out, feel free to send me an email. You see my email address there. And also, there's links where you can post a question on social media. Feel free to do that. I will respond to them, and always happy to take your your thoughts and input. As well, if there's a particular topic you'd like me to do a show on to expand on it, happy to do that as well. So any way that I can help you further as you figure this out, let me know. And okay, there we go. Here's the last slide. It's got all the legal stuff on it, right, that I have to put. If you want a copy of these slides, feel free to send me an email or post a comment, and I'll get your I'll get a way to send it to you. And there you go. And I think that's the end of the presentation. Yep. Okay, and we're going to stop share. Come on, stop share. There we go. Okay, so that's our show for today. The 10 issues to consider between being an employee versus starting your own business. And next week, as I mentioned at the start of the show, my guest is going to be Dr. Bob Sanders of NASA. So I encourage you to join us for that. You will be able to join us in the Zoom meeting through an Eventbrite event. So if you go to my Eventbrite page for Kevin Bemmel, you'll see where you can get a free ticket to join us, and would love to have you do so. Or of course, you can, like you did today, watch live on the various social media. So thank you again for joining me today. I hope you found this useful. Always looking to hear your comments, thoughts, good or bad, on how useful this was and how I can make it more useful for you. And that just leaves me to say, Marie, darling, my dear friend, you are still my belle. Y'all have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week.